Another episode of The Bad Batch is out, and it's everything we could have hoped for. Per usual, there will be spoilers for the episode in this video, so if you haven't seen the episode yet, go do so. That's an order, trooper, and good soldiers follow orders. At 2100 Galactic Standard Time, on the second to last day of the Clone Wars, every soldier in the Grand Army of the Republic received a simple transmission on a secure channel. The message was just 3 words: execute Order 66. With those words, a switch went off in the heads of every clone in the Republic. Almost every clone, that is. As we know full well from watching The Bad Batch, there were a select few clones who simply didn't respond to their inhibitor chips, while there were others who tried to resist the chip's effects to varying degrees of success. In this video, we're going to take a look at how some clones responded differently to the chips and why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In the first episode of The Bad Batch, Tech described the effect of the inhibitor chips as programming, but in reality, they worked in essentially the opposite way. The inhibitor chips were, well, inhibitors. They overrode the regular programming of the clones. In the immediate aftermath of their execution, this was to force the clones into following Order 66 and killing their Jedi generals. But after the fact, the chips took on a more insidious role, making the clones we thought we knew into willing fascist puppets. But as we've discussed before, the chips didn't erase clones' personalities or anything like that, nor did they force the clones to mindlessly follow orders, even if it might seem that way on the outside. From the outset, the Kaminoans engineered their clones to be highly obedient. This wasn't just done through the inhibitor chips. The Kaminoans actively altered several parts of the clones' brains in a bid to make them into better soldiers, usually by trimming away what made Jango Fett antisocial and independent and replacing it with more soldierly instincts. However, as with all other things the Kaminoans altered about the clones, minor deviations from clone to clone meant that this programming was effective to varying degrees. For some clones, obedience programming was abnormally effective. This was likely the case for Echo originally. Remember, he originally got his name from how he was prone to echoing the reg manuals, and even fellow clones joked that it was because of a genetic defect. Echo seems to have grown out of that, but there are more clones who didn't. From Legends, Commander Faye is another prominent example of an abnormally obedient clone. Faye, the absolute piece of Sith, was so utterly devoted to orders and regulations that he literally didn't change at all when Order 66 was issued. If you remember how awful Crosshair was in that Onderon sequence a few episodes ago, that's pretty much how Faye was before his chip went off. However, there were also abnormally disobedient clones. We did a video a year or two back about how Captain Rex was independent to the point of likely being defective, and that's essentially what we're talking about here. Many of the clones we saw in Star Wars The Clone Wars were like Rex in that they were fairly individualist, with very distinct personalities and identities. They were lucky they weren't stationed on Kamino because the Kaminoans might have had them euthanized for it. The clones weren't supposed to be that way, and the majority of them actually weren't. This is why the effects of the inhibitor chips varied from clone to clone. Some clones changed little with the activation of the chips, while others were even able to resist them to a degree. Most of those in the latter category were likely defectives, either true defectives like the Bad Batch, or clones that were just abnormally independent like Rex. Only the Bad Batch, as far as we know, was able to fully resist the inhibitor chips, with the unfortunate exception of Crosshair. But we saw at the end of the Clone Wars that Rex's chip seemed markedly less effective than those of the other clones. As far as we can gather, the inhibitor chips worked by taking the clones' latent obedience programming and turning it up to 11. While it might look to us in the audience like the clones were just following a new set of programming and forgetting themselves in the process, what really happened was that the clones became devoted to orders and regulations to the point of obsession. If you know anybody in real life that's like that, you could surely attest that they have literally no personality whatsoever, and as far as we know, those sorts of people in the real world don't have programming overrides. Clones' personalities were preserved by the chips, and more besides, From what we can tell, the inhibitor chips exploited clones' personalities to make them carry out orders. Nobody, not even programmed, brainwashed clone troopers, kills without reason. A fair part of forcing the clones to kill the enemies of the Empire would have been coming up with reasons for why they deserved to die. For many clones, the idea that good soldiers follow orders would have been enough, but for clones who were particularly close to their generals, for example, further reasoning would have been required. Consider the case of Crosshair. His inhibitor chip was only semi-effective, but it worked enough to make him turn on the Jedi and seriously consider turning on his squad. He gave us some pretty good insights into how the inhibitor chips warped clones into tools of the Empire. On Kala, after hearing that the clones had been told that the Jedi had betrayed the Republic, he quickly accepted this as an explanation before going back to hunting Caleb Dume. The implication there was that he had been looking for an explanation in the first place, and that he cared enough about why he had his orders that he commented on it. We have yet another clear-cut case of clones justifying Order 66 to themselves from Legends in the form of Commander Bakara. To put in his own words, "I hesitated for a moment when I received Order 66 because the last thing I expected was a Jedi coup. Did I feel betrayed? You bet I did. I thought of all my men who died under Ki-Adi-Mundi's command, and if I'd known then that he and his buddies were gearing up to do the separatist work for them and overthrow the government, I'd have shot him as a traitor a lot earlier. He betrayed the trust of every one of us." There isn't a hint of the sort of good soldiers follow orders brainwashing we're used to in this quote. Bakara was one of the more independent clones like Rex, and like Rex, he apparently hesitated briefly before executing Order 66. Unlike Rex, however, he quickly found a justification for carrying out the order, and so he did, without the near breakdown Rex had when he tried to kill Ahsoka. This brings us to the case we got to see in today's episode of The Bad Batch. After quite a lot of build-up, we got to see Wrecker go off, nearly killing his whole squad in the process. He seemed to go down the Fey route once the chip kicked in, spouting off regulations word for word and virtually going berserk. This is in line with what we know of Wrecker to a degree. While he wasn't stupid, he was definitely on the simple-minded side, and that seems to be what the inhibitor chip amplified in his case. And yet, we saw a bit of hesitation with Wrecker too. He probably ranked quite low on the whole obedience scale, and so when it came time for him to kill Omega, he seemingly couldn't do it. Granted, he only had a few seconds to kill her before Rex stunned him, but that should have been plenty of time. Like Rex, Wrecker had a degree of resistance to the effects of the inhibitor chip, enough to try and stop himself from hurting someone he didn't want to hurt. He didn't show any restraint against Rex or the Bad Batch, but we know that he didn't really refrain from hurting them anyway, per se. Prior to the chip being activated, he had never been malicious about it, but Wrecker had always been rough with the others. He was only careful with Omega. There's also the fact that Wrecker remembered the whole thing to consider. He didn't black out during the affair, and since he claims to have tried to stop himself, that means he was fully conscious too. Clearly then, the chips didn't just overwrite clones' identities. At the end of the day, the clones who killed their Jedi generals were the same men they had been before the chips went off. So that's our look at the different reactions some clones had to the inhibitor chips and why they happened. But what do you think? Are you excited to see where the Bad Batch will go next? Last episode was a pretty awesome episode, and we here at the Geetsly's team are pretty excited ourselves, so make sure you let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.